Good evening. Tonight's shiur, as always, Lili Nishmat Avi Mori Dover Mervin Numan Halevi Imi Maroti Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And I want to first, before we start, wish everybody a Tu B'Shvat Sameach, a happy and fruitful Tu B'Shvat. I hope you will find an appropriate way to celebrate the new year for the trees by eating lots of fruit. That's the normal custom. And by thinking about and acknowledging HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the one who provides all these wonderful trees with all these wonderful different properties for us to enjoy as human beings, and the opportunity that as we live in Eretz Yisrael, to perform all of the mitzvot associated with Eretz Yisrael and trees and other produce. Okay, this week we have the privilege, of course, of reading parshat Yitro. Parshat Yitro has, of course, the Aseret HaDibrot, but as usual, we're not going to talk about the Aseret. We're not going to talk about the primary theme of the parsha. We're going to talk about something that leads up to that. And we're going to really focus on two psukim today. But the reason I want to focus on these is to answer what I will call the question, the Pesach question that is raised. So I'm going to start with a verse from Pesach Seder. In the middle of the Pesach Seder, we have a wonderful, wonderful song that everybody loves to sing. It goes, Dayenu. It's a very familiar song. Everybody knows it. And one of the lines within the passage of Dayenu is Ilu Kervanu Lifnei Har Sinai, V'lo natan lanu et haTorah Dayenu. If he had brought us before Har Sinai and not given us the Torah, it would have been enough. Now, first and foremost, Dayenu, from my opinion, is one of the most misunderstood prayers, unfortunately, among what I will call the unenlightened. Who don't sit and try to understand what they're doing in the Haggadah. So even if they perhaps know a little bit of Hebrew and they may have read this passage, they're not really sure what it means. So first and foremost, when we say in the Haggadah Dayenu, Dayenu simply doesn't mean, oh, it would have been enough for Hashem, would have left us there at Har Sinai without giving us the Torah. No, what it means is that even if Hashem had only brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the Torah, we still would have always had to say thank you to Hashem for bringing us to Har Sinai. And tonight we're going to focus on what was so special about arriving at Har Sinai that we would have had to say thank you to Hashem just for getting to Har Sinai. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight, and we're going to do it by focusing on two psukim at the beginning of chapter 19, the first two psukim, which talk about Bnei Yisrael arriving at Har Sinai. So Pasuk Aleph tells us the following: B'chodesh Hashlishi, in the third month, the take Bnei Yisrael Eretz Mitzrayim, from the time the Jews had left Egypt. By Yom Hazeh, on this day, Bo Midbar Sinai, they arrived at the desert of Sinai. By Yisum Erefidim, then verse 2 tells us, goes back to where they came from. So verse 1 tells us they already arrived at Midbar Sinai. Then it says by Yisum Erefidim, they traveled from Refidim by Yovamu Midbar Sinai, and they came to Midbar Sinai, which you just said, by the way, back in verse 1, Bo Midbar Sinai. That's why this is highlighted in blue, because it basically repeats similarly the same phrase. Just says in verse 1, they came to Midbar Sinai, and then in verse 2 it says, and they came to Midbar Sinai. Vayachanu ba Midbar, and then they camped in the desert, but it doesn't say Vayachanu ba Midbar Sinai, it just says ba Midbar. Vayichan Ishtam Yisrael, and Israel camped there neged Har, opposite the mountain. Now, one of these things that is very, very interesting when you happen to be able to look at Hebrew words in the Torah, you'll notice I have two words highlighted in green. One is vayachanu, and they camped in the plural. The other is vayichan, they and he camped in the singular. And yet it says he camped singular. Jews camped in the singular, neged har, opposite the mountain. So the first thing I wanted to do is let you know, just for those of you who might think, okay, so that's just the way the Torah speaks. Sometimes it uses a collective noun for the entire people because it's a singular noun, the Jewish people. The Jewish people camped in the singular, perfectly normal. The answer is no, it's perfectly abnormal. Because in the Torah, we have the word vayachanu, referring to the Jewish people, 53 times. The word vayachanu appears in the Torah. And every one of those, it's referring to the Jews going from place A to place B and arriving at place B and camping there. By the way, 42 of those 53 are in the parsha of Maseh, where Moshe, at the end of the 40 years, gives a travelogue, and it goes very simply. Vayisume point A, vayachanuba point B, vayisume point B, vayachanuba point C, vayisume point C, vayachanuba point D, etc., for 42 stages of travel. There are 11 other times where we have this similar phraseology of vayachanu. The Jews are camping at a point. There's only one time in the Torah that the word vayichan appears referring to the Jewish people, and that's right here in this pasuk. So just keep that in mind. By the way, the word Vayichan happens to appear 3 times in the Torah. The other 2 times are in Bereshit. One talking about Yitzchak living in Gerar. The other talking about Yaakov arriving back home from Lavan and camping in Shechem. So just in case you were wondering how many times the word Vayichan appears in the Torah, the answer is 3. The word Vayichanu appears 53 times. And away we go. Okay, so Rashi, remember, with a couple of questions we want to ask. Firstly, why does verse 1 tell us that they arrived before they even, and then in verse 2 it tells us they left and they arrived? And another question we want to tell us, why does it say they camped in the singular? And a third question we're going to try to address is why by Yom Hazeh, why does it say on this day rather than where we were expected to say by Yom Ahu on that day? On the day they arrived was that day, not this day. So what does all this mean? Well, let's first, of course, as usual, we turn to Rashi. So Rashi says that by Yom Hazeh, the reason it uses the terminology Yom Hazeh on this day to point out that this day is a special day. What does that mean? And what's special about it? It was Barosh Chodesh. That when it says Yom Zeh, Yom Hazeh, it means on the day that is called Rosh Chodesh. How do we know Yom Hazeh is called, that Rosh Chodesh is called Hazeh? Because we have a pasuk in parshat Bo where it says HaChodesh Hazeh L'chem Rosh Chodeshim. This newness, that when the new moon is born, is called Chodesh Hazeh, this thing that is new. So therefore, by Yom Hazeh seems to apply to Rosh Chodesh. Now Rashi continues, it should have written by Yom Ahu. On that day they arrived. That was the day they arrived. Mal by Yom Hazeh. What is this today, that day, this day they arrived? Divrei Torah Chadashim Alecha Ki'ilu Hayom Nitano. That we should always view the words of Torah as fresh, as if we just learned them today for the first time. Very important lesson Rashi wants us to understand, because unfortunately we find it in the course of time, and this is especially true with students and young children and grandchildren, or whoever you might be trying to teach if you're a teacher, that they have a tendency to get bored. Oh, we did this before. This is the same old stuff. Give me something new here. So what the Torah is telling us, in order to really appreciate learning, to appreciate gaining knowledge, you have to always approach it as though it's something new. It's not something you've learned before. And if we do that, if you take any verse in the Torah, any statement in Chazal, and you try to approach it with a fresh perspective, you will always be able to find something new in it. That's exactly what Rashi wants us to understand, is the Torah's intent by saying Bayom Hazeh, today. Today, you can start anew, start to appreciate Torah from a different angle, a different perspective than you appreciated it before, by not thinking, oh, it's the same old stuff I've learned already. There's always something new to be gleaned, and that's exactly what Rashi tells us is the purpose of this pasuk. Now Rashi is going to go back and try to address question number 2. Why do we have this seemingly inverted order of telling us, oh, they arrived at Har Sinai. Oh, by the way, they left the freedom and then they arrived at Har Sinai. Why do we have this language again? So Rashi says the following. Once it's told us that they arrived at Midbar Sinai, why does it have to go back and explain where they came from? If we go back to the end of the parsha before it, which, by the way, there's this interspersion of Yitro in between, but we know that the Jews, last time we left them, were camped at Refidim. That was where they had the problem with the water. And Moshe hit the rock, and then Amalek came and fought against them in Refidim. So we know that they were in Refidim. It's obvious that that's where they had to travel from. Why? Because that's where they left them. That's where they were. If they were in point A, Refidim, they obviously left Refidim to get to the next station. Ella, Rashi says there's a reason why the pasuk wants to mention they left Refidim and they came to Midbar Sinai in the same verse, basically in the same statement. lahakish nesiatan merafidim leviatan lemidbar Sinai. To compare, the Torah wants to give a comparison and say that there was something similar between when they left Refidim and they arrived at Har Sinai. What was that? Ma biatan lemidbar Sinai b'tshuva. Just as when they arrived at Har Sinai, they had already done tshuva for the fact that they questioned whether God was in their midst at Refidim. So it wasn't that they suddenly arrived at Midbar Sinai and did tshuva. They had already done tshuva before they left, and that was why they were worthy of being allowed to move on to the next station to go to Midbar Sinai. So that was the next question Rashi addresses. The reason it goes back and tells us where they came from is to establish this parallelism between leaving what their mental state was when they left Refidim to their mental state when they arrived at Har Sinai. Third thing Rashi is going to address is this concept of Vayichan. Why does it use the singular here? This is, as I said, the only time in the Torah it uses the singular verb Vayichan, referring to all of Am Yisrael. And Rashi says the reason that we get that is Ke'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. All of the Jews were united like one person with one heart, literally, with one goal, with one focus. What was that focus? Obviously, the focus was they arrived at Har Sinai. They knew this was the culmination of their leaving Egypt. This was why they were there. Okay, Avo. But Rashi says, Shar Kol HaChanuyot. Every other time the Jews camped somewhere, it was B'ta'arumot Uv'mach Loket. There were challenges of Moshe and there were problems. This is the only time we don't have, the Jews are going to complain to Moshe. Well, they will later. They'll complain about something else. But when they first get there, everything seems to be running smoothly. For the first and only time throughout history. Okay. We'll skip the next one. Okay. Chizkuni. Chizkuni wants to address why it goes through this whole thing of First he quotes Rashi, Perish Rashi. Before while they were camped at Refidim, they had not yet done tshuva. L'kayim divrei rabotenu, which sort of Rashi says even though Rashi said they did tshuva before they left, while they were at Refidim, they didn't, and that's what Chazal say that the place Shenikra Shema Refidim, it was called Refidim al Shem Sherafu Yedehem Min HaTorah. The Refidim comes from their hands were weakened, meaning they were not fulfilling, they were not living up to what they should have been doing in terms of the Torah's expectations of them. Now, why did it say Vayachanu Bamidbar? Why did they camp in the desert? It doesn't say Vayachanu Bamidbar. It says Vayachanu Bamidbar. Why? Makom Hefker. Why is the desert chosen as the place where Am Yisrael is going to receive the Torah? Why specifically in the desert? Makom Hefker. It's an open place, ownerless. Kol harotze lekabel yavo v'yikabel. Whoever wants to come and receive the Torah can come and receive the Torah. In other words, the Torah is a free book. It's available to all. It's not something that you got to pay big dollars to be able to achieve and to find and to achieve in Torah. You have to come and be willing to invest the time and the energy, and anybody can do that because that's why the Torah is given in the open, in an ownerless place. Tells that nobody can claim, I own the Torah, you got to pay me if you want the Torah. Everybody has an equal portion in it. Okay, Sforno. Sforno says, simply Bayom Hazeh, why is it on this day to teach us that it's Bayom HaChodesh, that it is on Rosh Chodesh, as I explained above with Rashi, that Hazeh means Rosh Chodesh. Vayisnu Refidim. Okay, now, Rashi said the reason it tells us that they left Refidim and they came to Har Sinai was to tell us that they had done tshuva before they left. Sforno gives a different interpretation. He says, Nisiatam Refidim. They left Refidim b'kavanat ba'am el midbar Sinai. They already left Refidim with one thought in mind to arrive at Midbar Sinai. Why did they want to arrive at Midbar Sinai? Asher Sham Har Elokim, because that was the mountain where Hashem had revealed himself to Moshe. Ki Yadu, because they were already aware, Moshe had already told them that when they arrived at this mountain of God, where Hashem had revealed himself to Moshe at the burning bush, Ki Yadu Shesham Yavduhu. This was the place when Moshe asks Paro, for a 3-day leave to go serve Hashem, he's planning on going to Har Sinai because that was what Hashem told him. Tavdun et Elokim al Har Hazeh. Ki yadu. So therefore, Am Yisrael, since Moshe already told him this when he first introduced himself as that Hashem had appeared to him, he told him all that happened to him at the burning bush, and that Hashem had said, "You're going to come back here to serve." Ki yadu. Therefore, they knew Shesham Yavdu Kasha Amru Tavdun et Elokim al Har Hazeh. So that's why when they left Refidim, anxiously awaiting their arrival at Har Sinai. Unlike some of the other travels where they leave and they say, "Oh, why are we leaving here? There's a beautiful oasis here. Who wants to go to the next station? Let's stay here for a while." Whereas here, everybody knew what the next station was. They knew it was Har Sinai, and they were very anxious to get there. They were excited about going. And that's why it tells us that they left Refidim and they arrived at Har Sinai, because just like when they arrived at Har Sinai, they were excited to be there. So too, when they left Refidim, they were already excited about this next leg of the journey. That's Sforno's interpretation. Ramban. Okay. And Ramban, again, he says, the first two psukim don't make sense. Why? Because he says, the Torah should have said, firstly, these two psukim should have been combined as one. Should have said, "Vayisum Refidim," which is what normally happens. They traveled from Refidim. Vayachanuba midbar Sinai. They arrived at Har Sinai when Machodesh Hashlishi l'tzeitam me'eretz Mitzrayim, the third month after they left Egypt. Would have been a very concise way of putting these two psukim together. Kemoshin Emel, just like it said before in Midbar Sin, that the Israel traveled, they reached, and here was the date. We found that with the first day when they first got the money. It tells us they traveled from Elim to, I forgot whether they traveled from Marah to Elim, and they arrived on the 15th day of the second month. So why does it tell us here in this all long double order? Since their arrival at Midbar Sinai was Simcha Lahem B'Yom Tov, it was a day of rejoicing. Why? Because they had been anxiously awaiting their arrival at Midbar Sinai from the time they left Egypt. Ki yadu, because they were aware, Shesham Yekablu et HaTorah, that was where they were going to receive the Torah. Ki Moshe Gid Lahem, because Moshe told them, Mashen Emar Lo, what had been told to him, that this was where they were going to serve Hashem, as he was told at the burning bush. Become Leparo, and even to Paro Amar, he had said, "We got to go out on a 3-day journey out in the desert. We're going to find a place to serve Hashem, and that's where we're going to go." The Har Sinai. We know that the distance from Egypt to Har Sinai is generally a 3-day journey. This is why the parsha begins with Ki b'chodesh hashlishi bayom hazeh sheitchil hachodesh. On the third month, on the first day, the day that the month begins, that's when they arrived at Har Sinai. And after it already told us that, then and then it goes back to the regular formulation that they traveled from Refidim and they arrived at Har Sinai to tell us that that was the norm. That's the normal order. But the reason that the first verse is here is to us that it was the third month since they left, that they arrived at this destination that they'd been waiting anxiously and looking forward excitedly to arrive at. That's why it gets a special pasuk to tell us how that they were anticipating arriving there, and they rejoiced that they had finally gotten there. And really, the pasuk should not have said when they came to, but it should have said, Vayachanu, they camped at Midbar Sinai, like it says in every other place where the Jews travel. Vayisu, they travel from point A, Vayachanu, and they camp at point B. There's nowhere else where it says Vayisu from point A, and they Vayavo, and they came to point B. Actually, there's one other place, I take it back. There's one place we talk about Vayavo, where they come. But generally, it says Vayisu, they travel, Vayachanu, they camp. Avokata Vayavo Midbar Sinai, here it says that they came to Midbar Sinai to teach us something else. Lomar, to teach us the following. Kimiyad kishabau el Midbar Sinai. Immediately when they arrived in Midbar Sinai, Chanu ba Midbar, they immediately set up camp in the desert. When they saw the mountain opposite them. And as soon as they were in a position where they could see the mountain, in its full majesty, I guess, they camped immediately. They didn't go any further. Once they arrived at the mountain, they said, we're not going any further to look for a nice camping spot. We're going to camp right here opposite the mountain. They camped in the desert, or in the open area. It's a place desolate. Which was a desolate place before the mountain. In other words, they didn't go to look for an oasis. They basically decided, no, this is it. We're here at Har Sinai. We're going to stop and camp here, regardless of the fact that there's no oasis here, that this isn't the most suitable place to camp, because this is what we've been waiting for. The Zeutam, and this is why the Torah says, Vayachanu bamidbar, that they camped in the desert, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Negedar, and they camped opposite the mountain. In other words, as soon as they arrived there, they realized this is the mountain, this is where we got to be. They stopped and camped there. And it seems probable, Ramban says, they got rid of all of the converts who were there, the notness of the converts, all of the traveler, the camp followers who are not part of Am Yisrael. And the reason it says Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Har is to exclude all those who were not Jews, who were traveling with them, who weren't Jews. As we know, there was this Erev Rav that went with them. The Erev Rav Acharem, the Erev Rav was separate. They were in a separate place. Ki Yisrael Yitena Torah, because the Jews were going to accept the Torah, not the Erev Rav. Moshe Amar, as we're going to see later on in the dialogue between Hashem and Moshe that leads up to the giving of the Torah, Hashem tells Moshe, Kotomar Leveit Yaakov, V'taged Livnei Yisrael. Supposed to tell only the people who are Jews, not the others. V'zatam Vayichan Sham Yisrael, and that's why it specifically focuses that Israel camped there. Oh, was Kiram Derech Kavod B'Kabbalam Torah, or perhaps he says, well, maybe that's not necessarily the case, but perhaps it mentions Am Yisrael specifically to give them kavod because they were ready to accept the Torah. The fact that they were ready to accept the Torah means that they now are worthy of being called Yisrael. That's why it says Vayichan Sham Yisrael and not Vayichan Sham B'nei Yisrael. Ramban wants to say that this was that they were, because of this willingness to accept Hashem's Torah, they are suddenly elevated spiritually to the level where they can be called Yisrael, that they can be called the nation of Yisrael. Rashi Kotab, and now he quotes Rashi. Quotes Rashi, basically he paraphrased Rashi, says that the whole reason it goes through this double thing of travel, where they traveled from, was to teach them that they left the tshuva. The Lo Havi notes that I don't understand why Rashi felt forced to come up with this explanation, Ramban says. Shekach Nemar b'chol ha'masa'ot. This is the normal way the Torah deals with the Jews traveling throughout the 40 years they were in the desert. Everywhere it says they camped at such and such a place, then they left that place and they came to another place. Etc., etc. Parshat Maseh, we have 42 times they traveled from so and so, and they camped at such and such. They camped from such and traveled from such and such and camped at so and so. The Yirtzah Kosem Lefarish, but the reason that the Torah here emphasizes it, that they left Refidim and they came to Midbar Sinai, that this was a one-stop, one journey in the desert. It wasn't that it took them 3 different stopovers to arrive from Refidim to Har Sinai. There's no stopovers in between. They arrived immediately. That's what Ramban says. Okay. Continuing. Lashon Mechilta. And he now quotes the Mechilta. It seems that our pasuk here, that it says they left Refidim, they traveled from Refidim and they came to Midbar Sinai, is almost verbatim a pasuk that we have in Parshat Maseh. Why do we need it twice? Why does ours change the language to say instead of Vayachanu Bamidbar, Vayavamu Midbar Sinai, that they came? And that's why, again, that's exactly what Rashi says in Siyatam Refidim Biatam Lahar Sinai. And what he really wants to say, Rashi wants to say, Shemik Shekolamasot Chesiper Behem Kan Me Elim or Refidim Nishnu beparshat ela maseh b'shvil dvarim shenitchadshu b'hem sham b'katuv. The other travels that the Jews traveled during up to Har Sinai, which are repeated in Parshat Maseh, have something added there to teach us something, whereas this one doesn't. And that's why Rashi is forced to say there has to be something we learn from this. In other words, Ramban is explaining, even though I don't understand why Rashi felt forced to say we're learning something from this, then he comes back and says, now I understand why Rashi felt he had to learn something from this, because we have this virtually the same pasuk in Maseh, and if Torah wouldn't generally repeat a pasuk if there's not something different to learn. That's why we have to learn something from the word Vayavo Midbar Sinai, and that's why Rashi said we compare the two events, leaving and coming. Okay. Yor HaChaim HaKadosh goes in a slightly different way. Okay. Hine lama, hine. Lama shekadam me'otzem chibato yitbarach b'Yisrael v'godel cheshkol atet lem arusato dot haTorah. Because we want to understand, Har Chaim says that this introduction is to teach us the love Hashem has for Am Yisrael and this great desire that Hashem has to give them, because they are going to be betrothed, kiviyachol, they're going to be Hashem is going to accept Am Yisrael as his partner, as his kiviyachol, like a wedding. The Torah is the document that he is going to give to Am Yisrael. So now, if Hashem loves Am Yisrael so much and he wants to give him the Torah so much, we have a question. Why does it take Hashem till 3 months after they left Egypt till he decides, now it's time to give him the Torah? If you're really in love with somebody, if you love somebody, you want to give them the gift of your love immediately. Why are you waiting for? You don't want to wait. It seems like every minute when you're waiting, when you're in love with somebody, seems to be forever. So why is Hashem waiting till the 3rd month? If he wants to give Am Yisrael the Torah so much, why is he waiting? So first he offers one possible solution. Maybe it's because, they had to get there, right? It took them time to get there. That's the reason it takes till the 3rd month. Am Yisrael had to travel in the desert till they got there. And they had to travel slowly because there were so many of them with all the animals and the kids and the sheep. They had to travel slowly. So till they got there, that's why it took. That can't be, Har Chaim says that can't be the reason. Why? Alamatzinu, we find in the past, Shafil Eliezer, Eved Avram, Kaftel Haaretz. Eliezer arrives the same day he leaves Avram. He arrives the same day at the well in Haran. He travels that whole distance in one day. So clearly, just because he was going to perform the mitzvah of finding a wife for Yitzchak, Hashem makes the journey go immediately. Quick, he goes very quickly. Certainly, if this is, he wants to wed himself to Am Yisrael, not only the earth, but the heaven would rush and contract so that Hashem and they could meet and they could get there. So that can't be the reason. Ella al Kain, Asher al Kain ba Kadosh Baruch Hu v'natan am talat l'davar. Hashem had to give a reason why it took 3 months till they got there. Ki lo mir hacheshek hu asoveb el litzad hachsharat hachatan. They had to get everybody ready. Ki lo hayu Yisrael re'uyim litzad shayu be'eretz tumah. Bnei Yisrael, when they were in Egypt, weren't worthy of receiving the Torah because they were in a land of tumah. Hayu lenida b'neihem, and therefore they had to be separated from this tumah. And just like a woman has to separate and count 7 clean days, so too Am Yisrael had to count 7, not days, but 7 weeks. Before that, they were ready to receive Hashem. And therefore that's why it says, let's take Bnei Yisrael. That's why it says that's why it dates this 3-month period from when Bnei Yisrael left Egypt. Perush l'tzibat yitziatam mitzrayim. It doesn't mean only that from the time they left, but for the reason that they left. The reason they left Egypt was that they had to go around and prepare themselves till the third month. Paraya, and the proof that now was the time that approached, and they realized that this was the time. When the time arrived, when the third month arrived, bo bayom nasu, bo bayom bao. Once time came, there was no length of journey. The same day they left Refidim, the same day they arrived at Har Sinai. That the reason it says Hayom Hazeh, this day, means that the same day they left, the same day they arrived. That this travel, this journey from Refidim to Sinai was accomplished in less than a day. It was the same day they left, they arrived the same day. And I investigated this topic for error, and I see Otzem Cheshko Yitbarach Yisrael. This is to show the great desire that Hashem has for Am Yisrael, Shenikeret mitoch ma'asav, which is recognized through its deeds, beheir, or through as they awaken. Lama hitricham Hashem b'derech ad chodesh hashlishi. Why Hashem made them wait till the 3 months? However, if that was the reason, we should still ask a different question. They should have arrived at Har Sinai the first day they left Egypt, or immediately after they crossed the sea. When they could have waited there at for Zion Shavuot and then counted the 7 weeks there. And then we'd have the same waiting time, and they would go through this purification process all in the same place. Why did they have to go through all the different travels and wait till the third month till they got to Har Sinai? Still the question. So what does he answer? This again teaches us how great was Hashem's desire to give the Torah to Am Yisrael, because of Hashem's great desire to give the Torah to Am Yisrael. He did not want to keep them waiting at Har Sinai for the receiving the Torah. He wanted them, as soon as they got to Har Sinai, to be ready to get the Torah. Therefore, he made Am Yisrael travel slowly until they got to this place from the distance. Instead of traveling immediately and getting to Har Sinai immediately in one day, they traveled slowly. And they would learn from all of these things of Hashem's desire. Because the appropriate time hadn't arrived yet. So again, here I wanted to make sure that the time was appropriate, that the chatan was ready, the kala was ready, everybody was ready. As soon as they arrived, the chuppah would take place. Not that you have to get to the chuppah and then you have to wait till everybody's ready. That's why it takes till the third month. Okay. Orach Chaim continues. Kasha. Next question. Lama Iker HaMukdam. Why is this pasuk out of order? Because it says already, the pasuk before tells they arrived at Har Sinai. First, it should have written Vayisum Erefidim, Vayavomid Bar Sinai. Then it should have said B'chodesh HaShlishi. Sha'ar Bomid Arsavi Ulai, Shehu Al Derech Omram, Ahava Mekalkelet Hashura. That sometimes when we're in love, we lose all protocol. All protocol disappears when we're in love. We have strong emotions. Therefore, sometimes things that we would appear would be later are brought up first, and vice versa. This was the day that Hashem had been waiting, or all of creation had been waiting for the Torah to be given since they were created. From the day of creation. Throughout history, up until this point, all of creation was waiting with bated breath until Am Yisrael would arrive at Bar Sinai to receive the Torah, because that's what all of creation was waiting for. Therefore, when Am Yisrael arrived there, suddenly, immediately, all of creation stopped and wanted to hear, yes, wow, it's wonderful. Am Yisrael finally arrived at Har Sinai, at Har Sinai. Let's tell us that, and then we'll get on with the story. So immediately the parsha begins with that day they arrived. And again, all of the beloved and the beloved have arrived. And the heavens and the earth are rejoicing. Because this is the whole purpose of creation. It's hope that Am Yisrael would eventually accept the Torah. And then the Torah now goes back and repeats the normal order of, and now they traveled and they arrived. Again, what's the reason it repeats this? They came to Midbar Sinai twice. Why does the Torah have, now again, he's got other questions. Why does it repeat Vayavo Midbar Sinai twice? And why does it say they camped in the Midbar? Obviously, if they came there, they obviously had to camp there if they were there. The intent of the psukim of putting these things in here again. The Torah wants to emphasize three different things that are the fundamental principles, fundamental basic things we need in order to be able to Kabel Torah. That because of these three things, that without these three things, Hashem would not have given us the Torah. We need to have all these three things in order for Hashem to give us the Torah. What are they? Number one, we have to understand and be willing to undertake toiling in Torah. It's not something that you just can kind of float on. You got to work at it. Ki ha'atzlut, laziness, who esav ha'mafsid hasagata, will cause the loss of being able to accomplish and grow in Torah happens through laziness. You have to overcome your Yitro to be lazy. You have to have strength to be able to toil in Torah if you want to go forward. Therefore, we'll find every time Hashem mentions the learning Torah, studying Torah, strengthen yourself, amat, be strong, be mighty. To the extent that you have to be willing to toil until you're so exhausted that you're kiviyachol almost going to die over the Torah. As it says, if you want to acquire Torah, you got to be willing to sit in the tents of Torah and study and work and toil. As Chazal say, if you want to grow in Torah, you have to be willing to almost be willing to toil at it endlessly. As we have many sayings in Chazal about the importance of being willing to toil in Torah. Okay, that's number one. We'll go. The rest is all just quoting more things. Okay. Inyan bet. Number two, hu hashiflut ba'anava, is not being haughty and being modest. Ki ein divrei Torah mitkaimim ela b'mi shemashpil atzmo meisim atzmo k'midbar. The words of Torah can only be established with somebody who lowers himself to the extent that he's willing to realize that he doesn't know anything and he's willing to learn from other people. He makes himself like the desert where he's willing to accept things from anybody. And that's why it says, they camped in the desert. Just like everybody walks on the sand in the desert, so too, somebody who is low, who is an anav, doesn't mind if doesn't focus on all the people walking by and all the people who might be belittling him. He's not interested. He's interested in focusing on his own thing. And the third thing is the fact that if you really want to acquire Torah, you can't do it alone. It's not a one-person deal. You got to do it together with others. With a chabura. B'leiv shalem etamim lo sheyeh bad b'vad shaleim amar katuv cherav habaladim v'no alu. Can't be done one by one, because when you do it one by one, you miss things. You have nobody to correct you, nobody to put you on the right path when you're off, and you keep going further and further off the path instead of being further and further on the right path. They have to gather together. And each one sharpens the other. And each one will explain to the other if they're making a mistake, and together between the two of them or the three or the group, they will arrive at a better understanding of all of the issues. That's why it says that they camped there in the singular, that they all grouped together as one person. Now, through these three things, they are able and ready to accept the Torah, through being willing to toil in Torah, through realizing that no matter how much Torah I've acquired, I'm still don't hold myself high and mighty because of it. And three is by being willing to learn with others and to help through group learning to achieve better understanding. So those are the three principles that we need for growing in Torah. And that's why all of these things are emphasized here in this week's parsha, where we're talking about accepting and learning and growing in Torah. Okay. I'm going to skip Hamek Davar because we're running late already, as usual. And we're going to go right to the okay. Let's go right to the Shimon. Here we go. Okay, Shimon has a very, very interesting comment here. Why it says Vayichan Sham. This is very based on a very similarly well-known principle, but I wanted to quote it here, and then we're going to go to the Kli Yakar to finish up. Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Har. Why is it used in the singular? L'kabalat HaTorah. Because in order to receive the Torah, we required unity. In order for Am Yisrael to be able to receive the Torah and to achieve what they really need to achieve as a nation, we have to be united. Very powerful, important message. If we don't have shalom, we don't have coordination, cooperation, peace, and after unity, we can't go any further. The lazeh, and in order to achieve shalom and achdut, those two things, ha'ikar midat anava v'savlanut. We have to have anava, humility, and savlanut. We all know what savlanut means. It's the number one word. Gets Israel, that's the number one word you're going to need. Savlanut, take it easy. You'll get it done. It'll happen. The eino makbid neged chavero, and somebody who is not very strict about his friend, and he's not medakdek, he doesn't everything his friend does, he doesn't interpret it negatively and improperly. Har moreh al gavhut, since the mountain represents haughtiness, the zevayichan Yisrael neged har, nagdut lahar. That's why it says the Jews Am Yisrael camp opposite the mountain. In other words, with the opposite thing that a mountain represents. A mountain represents generally haughtiness. Am Yisrael took the opposite trait of humility. Humility leads to unity, and only through unity can Yisrael accept and achieve the Torah. Okay, we're going to close with the Kli Yakar. Is our pasuk. Re'eh, Kli Yakar says, look, kama kifalim nichtavu kan. Look at how many duplicates we have in this pasuk. What would the pasuk have missed if it had said in one pasuk instead of two? By they traveled from Refidim, and they camped at Har Sinai, Midbar Sinai, opposite the mountain. Why do we have both the Vayachanu and the Vayichan in the same pasuk? First it says Midbar Sinai, and then it changes, it says just Bamidbar. First says they got to Har Sinai, and then it just calls it Neged Hahar, just Stam Hahar. Why do we have all of these duplicates? Benira. And it appears to me, all of this is to prove Shalohayu Yisrael Re'uyin LeKabbalat HaTorah. Am Yisrael was not worthy of receiving the Torah Asher Yiyeh Shalom Beinehem, until they are at peace one with another. There's a pasuk in Kohelet that says all of these advice are given from one source. But Torah, and we know that when it comes to Torah, kol netivoteh shalom, we have in the pasuk tells us all of the paths of Torah are shalom, are peace. Ki mitoch pirud halavavot ze osev ze matir. When we have differences of opinion and we can't discuss them and reach a conclusion where everybody agrees, where one says no, it's not permitted, the other says it's permitted. V'nimtza Torah kishtei Torot. It appears like we have two different Torahs. We have the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim. It's like they have two different Judaisms here. Not the way it's supposed to be. That's why it says, B'chodesh HaShlishi, in the third month, Vayom hazeh bo midbar Sinai. They arrived in midbar Sinai. Why specifically the third month? What is the third month? Horet, to teach us, Shechodesh zeh, this month, the third month, Shemazalot Te'omim, whose symbol is the twins. Hamora al Hadivuk, that teaches us about unity, about joining together with love, that they should join together like twins are joined together, like they're joined together before birth, but like they have to be together. The Azi, yeah, and if we're joined together, like we feel each other, we each feel that we're twins and we're responsible for each other. The Azi, yes, Shalom Ravli Ohavei Torah. There will be great love to those that love Torah, great peace to those that love Torah. The Yesh Bazeh Remes Gam Kain Lishnei Luchot. There's also hint in this through the two Luchot. Shayu Kitomim Yachdav Chamisha Mo Chamisha, that were like twins. The two tablets were twins, one of each other, 5 versus 5. The Achar Kach, and then the Torah says, then after it tells us the importance of Shalom, it tells us Vayisum Refidim. They had to travel from Refidim. What was Refidim? Hainu min hamakom asher hayasham berivu machloket. That was the place where there was quarreling, there was debate, there was a difference of opinion, there was. Hang on, wait, I lost my place here. Okay, because the place Refidim was also called Masa, testing, Meriva, strife, or Refidim. They argued. Otiot Peridim. Refidim is also the letters of Peridim, separating. Kamo Keves Kesef, like we have other words in Hebrew where the letters change. Al Shema Pirut Shayabinim, because of the separation that was between them. They were not feeling united and they were not feeling like brothers. Chazal Doshumi Lasham Raf Yadayim, their hands were weak. He's at Talui Bezeh, that one is dependent on the other. Ki Al Yidei Pirut, when we are separate, Rafu Yidei Mina Torah, when we are busy quarreling with one another, we can't focus on growing in Torah. V'achshav, and now that's why the Torah tells us Nasum Refidim. They left Refidim. Mina Makoma Hura Talomar. What does that mean? Hisiu Atzmam Mina Perud. They left behind mentally the idea of arguing, quarreling, and being separate. Vayavo Midbar Sinai, and they came to the place of Midbar Sinai. Ki Makom Zeh. This place, Goram Lem Shiyuba Gudachat, that they should all join together. Ki Bakashat Hakavod Hashrara Siba L'Chol Riv Onega. Because we know that generally, what are people quarreling about? Either money or honor or something else that they feel they've been slighted. Okay. The Al Yidei Sharo, once they saw Har Sinai Hanavuch Shabarim that Har Sinai is not the tallest of mountains, it's one of the lowest mountains. But Hashem still chose to rest his presence on Har Sinai to teach us this lesson of humility. Azro, then they saw Shekadosh Baruch Hu B'Ocher Ba'anavim. Hashem wants those who are humble. And through seeing Har Sinai and learning this lesson of Har Sinai, they chose humility, and that is why they arrived at peace. That's why it starts out with the plural Vayavo Midbar Sinai, Vayachanu Bamidbar. They came to Midbar Sinai and camped. Larosh Mitzada Midbar, Adayin Chalukim B'Deyotam. In other words, when they arrived in the Midbar, they were still quarreling. That's why it says Vayachanu. They camped. They were still not all united. Ach b'vo'am neged ahar, when they stood and camped opposite the mountain, the Hugad lahem ki al har hazeh yarad Hashem, that this low mountain Hashem is going to rest His presence on. Then it says Vayichan Yisrael. Then they camped in the singular. B'leiv echad ki ish echad. Av mitchila kodem shebo lahar zeh. Before they got there and they saw the mountain and they learned the lesson of the mountain, Bein v'vom al toch hamidbar, bein mechaniyatam b'midbar, dayin lo saram imach lakotam, ad shebo neged ahar ka'amur. Until they arrived opposite the mountain, they didn't realize this lesson of the importance of humility, the importance of peace, the importance of unity, all of these things which were prerequisites for receiving the Torah. However, since the name Sinai, which Chazal tells us is related to the exact opposite of peace, of hatred, that Sinai is called Sinai because that's where it's from Sinai that all the world hates us, because they hate us, because we are their moral conscience. Therefore, the Torah has to say, they camped opposite the mountain. Ki mahut hahar garam hashalom v'lo shmo. That the essence of the mountain was what provided Am Yisrael with the lesson that led to peace and unity between them, and not its name. That's why it says Neged Har, opposite the mountain, and it doesn't say Neged Har Sinai. Doesn't mention the name. So again, our answers again, and as we saw before, the Shimon and others. The key here to Am Yisrael and successfully reading, and why now to go back to our original question, why in the Haggadah do we say Iler Kevana or Lifnei Har Sinai lo natan lanu et Torah dayenu? Because when just the arrival at Har Sinai and the achdut of Am Yisrael that took there, that lesson was such a powerful lesson that that's enough that we would have to thank Hashem for giving us that opportunity, for teaching us that when we all join together, we can accomplish everything. And we hope and pray that we learn that lesson of after of all the lessons that we have in this week's Torah reading, which is, again, as I said, focused specifically on Achdut and growing in Torah and doing it together and not lording it over one over the other, saying, see how important I am and how great I am, but realizing how important HaKadosh Baruch Hu is and his Torah is. We can continue to grow, and hopefully we will be able to reach the fulfillment of Torah by teaching the whole world how to live a Torah life, and we'll be zocheh to Gula Shleimim Meir. Thank you all. I open up now for questions, comments, feedback. If you have any questions or comments, anybody? Okay, nobody questions. No questions or comments. Okay. Have a good rest of the week.